No, no, sorry. It's just my chair. I was just
Is called to order. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. For roll call, everyone is here. At this time, I would like to thank the Aylmer Legion and the town staff for organizing a remembrance ceremony on September the 19th to commemorate the passing of Her Majesty the Queen. We will now take a moment of reflection and respect. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda.
This is moved by Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Barber, that Council adopts the agenda for the meeting of September 21st, 2022 as presented.
Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There are no delegations in public meetings this evening. Adoption of council and committee minutes. Minutes to approve.
This is moved by Councillor Oslich, seconded by Councillor Charlton, that Council approves the following minutes. Regular meeting of Council held on September the 7th, 2022.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. And minutes to receive.
This is moved by Councillor Oslich, seconded by Councillor Chapman, that Council receives the following minutes. Meeting of the Aylmer Area and Port Burwell Area Secondary Water Supply System Joint Board of Management held on June 8th, 2022, and meeting of the Elgin County Council held on August 9th, 2022.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Next item up is the consent agenda.
This is moved by Deputy Mayor Andrews and seconded by Councillor Barber, that consent agenda item 7.1 be received for information with actions to be taken as noted.
Okay, are there any questions or concerns with the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. We'll move into action items. The first item up is report OPNS 13-22.
This is moved by Councillor Chapman and seconded by Councillor Ham, that report OPNS 1322 entitled Traffic Signal Operational Review, Talbot Street and John Street intersection be received as information, and that Council support the proposed improvements to signals as outlined in the report Operations 1322 in principle.
Okay, I'll turn this over to you, Rob, if you give us a bit more information, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the council will recall, the direction was given for us to review that intersection late last year. Consultant was secured to sort of review the operations. It was off to a bit of a slower start than we would anticipate. We were hoping to have this report in before council a little bit before now, but we wanted to make sure as things started to open up after the COVID that we're capturing the right traffic data out there. So I think the first one started probably in April, and then he's done a couple of reviews of the intersection, looking to see how it performs since then. The latest one was in August to make sure we capture that late summer sort of vacation traffic out there. You can tell it's a fairly extensive report. The consultant reviewed the existing signal timing, did site inspections to observe the flow of traffic, and then also reviewed the accident data provided by the Elm Police to look at the accident history for the last 3 years. 3 years is a typical window. You're not sure what happened at that intersection prior to 3 years or any changes, so 3 years is a typical window. You can see it's a fairly comprehensive report. If I could maybe just summarize it, what we have is a signal that's really not performing as well as it should be. It's sort of a static traffic signal out there. More modern responsive signals with sensors would fluctuate and change as the traffic demands influence the signal. So that is what the consultant is suggesting, is really the signal has to be brought up to, you know, a more responsive approach. It is the main signal in town. It's not just impeding the traffic that flows through the signal. It's right downtown. You can tell some of the times it's stacked up. I guess in the Coles notes, you have a C-level student that's underperforming, I think is where you're really at with this signal. So it takes a little more warrant. Heather's included a placeholder in the budget of $70,000. That's sort of a high-level estimate. We won't know until we sort of get into it, and we can come back later with a more pinned-down budget for council. But just to give you an idea, the control cabinet itself, the last one we bought was at Calverley Road. That one was like $15,000. So that's the control cabinet and stuff like that. So assuming that the new stuff can fit in the existing cabinet, we could save some money there. If we didn't have to cut loops in the asphalt, or we could put in radar detection sensors or stuff like that, still has to be looked at. And then finally, as we're not the road authority at this location, I know it's been brought up a couple of times, it's the county road and the provincial highway. The senior road authority is the governing road authority when you have those types of intersections. Whoever is senior, they run through actually right at the property lines. Their authority goes straight through. But by virtue of our connecting link agreement with the province, they've divested some of that authority to us through town. So the changes that staff are proposing are within our authority of our connecting link agreement. So.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Are there any questions for Rob? Councillor Barber?
Thank you, Your Worship. To Rob, it was a very technical, complex report to read. You've said that it's within our privy to go ahead and do the changes if the budget is approved by council. Is there a timeline that it would take to make that happen once the approval is there? And is it going to be conditional on the other bodies approving those changes?
Through your worship, I don't believe we would require the other governing body's approval, having reviewed the agreement. The slowest part of the implementation is usually the controller, the inside and the conflict monitor. Those are, although they're a computer, they're somewhat unique to each individual intersection. And in fact, for Calverley Road, you'll recall, we bought the controller in advance of putting out the tender because the rest of the work was actually fairly easy for the electricians to call. So we would have to do a little bit of work and then reach out to Econolite, which is the controller supplier, and give them our specs. I would think like a 6 month start to finish. Once we start, we could probably have it done by.
Just one follow-up question. Is the conduit under the pavement adaptable or compatible with any new cables that have to be run, like for sensors and things like that?
Through your worship, yeah, that would be my hope, that we could use the existing conduit in there. You know, there's a lot of new technology out now. You don't have to cut the loops in the asphalt. You could try some sensors that are on top of the heads and wire that back into the controller. But those are some of the things that we'd have to look at. I would hopefully that most of the cabling and wiring would suffice and carry forward to the new.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Charlton, go ahead.
Through your worship to Rob, so who determines the traffic pattern? Are the north-south lanes, are they both going to have left turn signals at the same time, or if it's not set up the way it's not going to work, how long does it take to change that?
Through your worship, my experience is that's the one thing with the traffic dynamics. It's the one kind of engineering. Having done this before, my experience is it's fairly responsive right out of the gate. If you go through his report, we've got phasing that's static right now. So each phase, left, turn, right, stop, is static. Also, our cycle length is static. So if you dig down further into the report, he's saying both of those would be dynamic based on the traffic demands. So if you look at it sort of like a clock, everybody has to you have to get through all those phases by the time you get to the clock. You can't simply say, well, we can't do it all in a minute. Why don't we go 20 minutes? Because then you can imagine that first phase would be 20 minutes. So there's an optimum cycle time that you can kind of push it out to based on the intersection. And while you're pushing that cycle time out, you can also adjust who gets whichever piece of the pie. And then it would be dynamic based on the demand of the traffic, whichever left turn calls for left or right. They'd also have a minimum green and a maximum green. So let's say there was a call for a green light, and if the sensor detected more and more cars, the idea would be to clear those. Then that green would max out at whatever, it's 30 seconds or something. So it's a fair bit to it, but that's the goal, is to have that thing as fluctuating and responsive as we could.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Andrews?
Thank you, Your Worship. To Rob, this request was brought on by a counselor, I forget, okay, Counselor Oslap. And is there any proactive studies that are done through the road authorities they would do like regular testing of intersections as they change, like every 5 years, 10 years, or is it always based on someone bringing it to their attention?
Through your worship, Deputy Mayor, my experience, it's usually based on see it. Probably a good idea, as traffic demands seem to, every 5 years now, it seems to be a different traffic pattern out there. But we haven't built anything like that into our budget.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? Go ahead, Counselor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. To Rob again, if the need is there, would that be a good time to incorporate four-way red for emergency vehicles?
That's certainly something we can look at and check with the consultant if it's an opportunity to do so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything further from council? Okay. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is Finance 15-22.
This is moved by Councillor Charlton and seconded by Councillor Barber. That report, Finance 1522, entitled 2023 Budget Public Survey, be received for information.
Okay, Heather, are you going to be taking this one, or are you, Andy?
I'll start with this one, and then Heather will deal with the other budget ones.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Mayor French. Very briefly, this report highlights the outcomes of our second annual budget survey. Staff are pleased to have a continued high level of engagement in this process. It's often tough to get the public interested in the budget, and I hope that those that commented and those that missed the survey will continue to write or provide comments as we proceed through the process. Our real intent here is to develop an ongoing dialogue with the community, so it doesn't stop when the survey stops. We focused on quality of life in Aylmer in this to try to gauge how the pandemic and inflation have impacted residents since 2021. The results are positive in that we see that people's quality of life is trending in the right direction. This isn't to diminish individual lived experiences, but respondents ranked financial security, personal relationships, and physical health as the biggest risks to quality of life in our community. In terms of prioritization of issues, affordable housing and the cost of living were ranked the highest. Perceptions around the level of trust in government were also examined. We don't have a benchmark to evaluate this data against. This is the first time we kind of did this question. The information is useful in gathering, though, and staff are generally interested in examining what degree increased accountability and transparency measures may have to create more trust. As council is aware, the town's continued focus is on openness and transparency, and it not only serves the public, but supports a strong internal culture of ethics and pride in service amongst our staff. So that openness and transparency is really critical to who we are. Overall, the evaluation of town services ranked well. The services that performed the worst was our recreation facilities. This is not entirely a surprise to staff, as this service was highlighted in the last year's budget survey as well. Staff have been working diligently for the last 4 to 6 months on plans to address this area. We would appreciate residents participating in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that is currently available. So that survey is up, and there will be a public house related to that. So the information from this engagement will also be added to what we've already seen in this budget survey to really inform our next steps in having a comprehensive plan. The survey shows that residents would prefer service levels to remain the same or increase in the town, even if this means costs are absorbed by the ratepayers. I will likely recommend to the incoming council that they take this statistics kind of with a grain of salt, as I don't think that there is an awareness by members of the public that with annual inflation anticipated to be around 8% this year, that every municipality in Ontario, even with significant reductions, is looking at very large increases next year. I think it's going to be a very surprising year, and when I see these results in the survey, I think people are thinking, oh, well, does that mean a 3 or 4% increase? A 3 or 4% increase next year is a significant cut to services for every municipality, not just Aylmer. And I think as we progress to the budget processes in December and January and February, and all municipalities get there, it's going to be kind of a broader narrative that everybody will see. But with that, I'll also encourage people to review all the comments, all the information in the survey. We put it all out there for the public so that people can see everything. And it really, there is a lot of interesting value from it, and we are committed to continuing the process moving forward. And if council has any questions, myself or Heather will try our best to answer them.
Okay, council, do you have any questions? Councillor Charlton, go ahead.
Through your worship, how was the response rate this year compared to last? We had 138 responses this year. Did we have more or less last year?
We had, I think it's around 70 or 80 less than last year. Last year, I would say, was particularly interesting because there were some hot button issues like the library on it that drew more responses. So still, we're looking at response rates on both of 2 to 1%, which would be statistically valid in a community of our size.
Are there any further questions or comments concerning this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. The next report is CAO 55-22.
This is moved by Councillor Ham and seconded by Councillor Chapman. That report CAO 5522 entitled Taxation Fairness, Town of Aylmer, be received for information.
Okay, I'll turn this over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Mayor French. This report is before you and the public. I don't really desire to speak to the nature of how this error occurred, as that really falls to Elgin County. I appreciate the county identifying this error and expediting the FOI request and waiving the FOI fees for us. I would again note that the numbers in this report were preliminary ones that the county issued to area municipalities in March of 2022. So they're not representative of the final actual numbers. I actually met with most of the CAOs last Friday, and they confirmed that their numbers changed significantly. So these were point-in-time numbers that have been corrected by many of them. A further report on this will be brought to the next term of council with recommendations upon how to advocate for Aylmer on this issue. Ultimately, if the full cost of the taxes were recovered by the county, then there is no need for advocacy. So at this time, what we need is an understanding of how the county has fulfilled the legislative requirements around tax administration, tax write-offs, and associated public reporting. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions for Andy? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is Finance 16-22.
This is moved by Councillor Oslich and seconded by Councillor Barber. That report, Finance 1622, respecting the 10-year capital and operating budget, be received as information, and that council approve the proposed 10-year capital budget and described work plan as presented, and that council acknowledge the preliminary operational budget for information as presented, and further that council directs staff to present the 2023 capital budget and 2023 operational budget to the next term of council for review and adoption.
Okay, thank you, Josh. I'm going to turn this over to you, Heather, and you can walk us through this report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you and to members of council, as Andy mentioned, we were thankful that we had some really genuine comments in the budget survey. We took that feedback very seriously, and we have completed an in-depth preliminary analysis on operations and capital so that the outgoing council can review it and in principle endorse it. So for the second year in a row, some of these items have come up on the budget survey. The Parks Recreation Master Plan was one of the outcomes that came in from last year's capital. The other one for operations was the ECC, which I'll touch on. So to summarize high-level changes with capital, so we've shifted the capital projects related to water and wastewater and phase 2 for the lagoon optimization in order to support the developing infrastructure that's or the developments that are happening in Cottonwood and so forth. So we're suggesting that also with the preliminary pricing that has come in for Elk Street, that Elk Street's delayed just until we can see the prices correct themselves with the supply chain. And, you know, hopefully the double price that it looks like it's going to be will go down by, you know, a few million, we're hoping. We're basically suggesting that the RFP, or sorry, for the all the rest of the roads projects are going to be after Elk Street. Elk Street's the priority. We move those slightly behind Elk Street. We've carried forward the industrial park project for 2023, and we have the outcomes of the Parks and Recs master plan, which we will be entering in the capital budget for development for 2024. As I mentioned before, with the community response being tremendous, we're openly communicating the constructive feedback to all departments in the town of Aylmer. From the response we had from the previous budget survey, we did take a deeper dive into certain business units, looking at labor utilization, you know, making sure that all of our training requirements are happening so that all of our staff are cross-trained so that we can be a stronger team without adding any more headcount. There's ongoing development in corporate and legislative services and finance, including HR, to automate business processes and modernize administration. The Director of Operations is now overseeing Parks and Recs, so you're going to see some changes happening there. Some efficiencies have already been found in labor utilization, reducing some expenses, and of course, as soon as we receive the feedback from the master plan, we'll be able to form the basis for the next realignment. In addition, every single job description has been reviewed with HR. ECC is now that it's open, we can actually look at offering more inclusive programming. So we have, you know, the administrative staff all the way up to the managers and top down, all hands on deck on this so that we can put in some proper programming, reprioritize the programming, and basically try to get some of the programs implemented that are no cost to or no headcount and no additional capital investment until the board is able to resume again. So as you can see, we've included a lot more detail in these budget documents. We've taken an excerpt from the final operational budget document, pulled it ahead, just so that this council has a first look on where we're trending. So after we get the after we get all the feedback from council, we'll implement the final budget documents, hopefully for presentation in December. That's our goal. The impact data won't come in until the first week in December, which would form the basis for the tax rate. So we can't really tell you that, but we can tell you where we're trending on the levy. And we're all here to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you very much, Heather. Are there any questions for Heather? Well, you must have answered everybody's questions in your report. That's great. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is CAO 56-22.
This is moved by Councillor Chapman and seconded by Councillor Charlton. That report CAO 5622 entitled Federal Electoral Redistribution be received for information, and that staff be directed to submit written comment to the Federal Electoral Boundaries Commission in support of the position of MP Karen Vecchio, Elgin County, and the City of St. Thomas, and further, that staff be directed to request notification of public hearing date once set by the commission.
Okay, thank you, Josh. I'll turn this over to you, Andy, please.
Thank you, Mayor French. This report is to lend our support primarily to Elgin County, St. Thomas, and Central Elgin. I want to thank Adam Bedridge from Malahide as he shared his report with me, which I borrowed largely from for this. This issue of federal redistricting is perhaps not as pressing to Elmer as it is to our partners. It is, however, important to be a team player upon this, and we're recommending mirroring their position and making a presence at the hearing on this. And probably we will proceed to allow another municipality with a greater interest to speak on Elmer's behalf, but we do want to make sure that we show up and provide a presence. And with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions for Andy? Go ahead, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. It's hard to understand the logic behind this redistribution. It's almost like people are sitting in a windowless room and throwing darts at a board. It makes no sense. Hopefully, the effort's going to have some kind of effect. It's crazy.
That's for sure. Go ahead, Councillor Oslach.
Yes, Your Worship. I noticed that St. Thomas is in new district. Is in a new district. That's a no-no.
Well, hopefully we can, make our point very clear. I think all municipalities are writing letters. The County of Elgin is working on it. I was at the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus meeting the other day, so that's 15 counties, and we're all working on a strategy for it. And they're going to make a submission as in written and oral form. The thing is with this, just to give you a little bit of background, what I found amazing is it's a coverage area from Niagara region to southwestern Ontario, so that we can have our say. It's a 2-hour time slot for that whole area. So that's why we're really pushing written submissions, but you have to be registered to attend in order to hand in your written submission. Yeah, it's quite interesting. So the commission, I guess they figure, 2 hours is enough. So we were talking to one of the members of parliament about this from Sarnia, and she said that it works out to 40 seconds per each municipality to have an opportunity to speak, and it's virtual. So I'm very happy that that everyone in Elgin County is on board with this, because this is affecting Elgin County, especially Central Elgin and Southold. So I think it's quite a serious issue, and I hope that they listen. But as Councillor Barber said, you don't know how they come up with some of these ideas. So thanks, Andy, for that report. Are there any further questions or comments about this? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is Clerk 43-22.
This is moved by Councillor Barber and seconded by Deputy Mayor Andrews. That report 4322, entitled Regular Council Meeting Schedule for 2023, be received for information, and that council approves the regular council meeting schedule for 2023 as submitted.
Okay, thank you. Owen, could you give us a bit more information about this report, please?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor French. So this report is being provided in accordance with the procedural bylaw. The dates within the attached schedule to the report are outlined in the procedural bylaw. The only changes which have been made are moving the January meetings back by 1 week to avoid a back-to-back meeting. And I will also note the summer meetings are scheduled on the second Wednesday at 5:30 according to the procedural bylaw. And when approved, this report will be submitted to the next council as a consent item, and they would have the ability to alter the schedule if they desired to.
Okay, thank you, Owen. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And the next report is Clerk 44-22.
This is moved by Deputy Mayor Andrews and seconded by Councillor Oslach. That report, Clerk 4422, entitled Town of Elmer Electronic Monitoring Policy, be received for information, and that council approves the electronic monitoring policy as presented, And further, that council directs staff to circulate the policy as mandated by.
Okay, Josh, did you want to give us a bit more information about that report, please?
Certainly, through your worship and two members of council, term of the resolution states, Bill 88 came into effect in April, and it requires all employers in Ontario with more than 25 employees as of January 1st, 2022, to prepare an electronic monitoring policy before October 11th. So at that point, once the policy is complete, it must be circulated to employees within 30 days of approval. So looking through some of the policy requirements that were outlined by the province, the written policy on electronic monitoring must include a statement as to whether or not the employer engages in electronic monitoring. And then if it should also outline where the employer does electronically monitor employees. It must contain a description of how the employer may electronically monitor their employees and describe the circumstances under which they're monitored. So staff have done an environmental scan of our internal business processes. We've looked across our different departments. I should mention that the Elmer Police are outside the scope of this policy, being that they don't fall under the ESA. So we've summarized sort of every situation within the policy where staff could be electronically monitored as defined by the province. So really, there is a wide range of options. So we've got everything from endpoint threat detection on sort of your semantic antivirus to Outlook email. We've got the electronic card system, and then there's telematics within some of our vehicles. So that's just a few of the examples that we're including. All of the examples that I just mentioned are justified. There's good reasons for us having that technology in place, but really this policy obligates us to sort of document it all within one written policy. So finally, I just want to note that really nothing in the policy affects or limits the town's ability to use the information obtained through electronic monitoring. Like I said, this was a good opportunity for us to review our business processes and make sure that everything's justified, and we're confident that it is. And really, it doesn't have any impact on the way that we're going to do business. We're just meeting our statutory obligations under Bill 88. And with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Josh. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Councillor
Yes, Your
Oslach.
Worship. Does council fall under this policy?
Through your worship, that's a great question. As far as I understand, they would. So members of council, again, you obviously everyone has a right to privacy, but again, when you have your Outlook email, all of that information is stored on a server. So again, that's sort of something that would fall under electronic monitoring as outlined in the policy. Are you actually being electronically monitored? The answer is no. But just the fact that that data exists somewhere, requires us to include it in the policy.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. New business and matters of urgency. Reading of bylaws and proceedings thereon, 3 readings.
This is moved by Councillor Oslach and seconded by Councillor Charlton. That council gives 3 readings to the following bylaw, which is the bylaw 3222, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at all of its meetings held during the calendar year 2022.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Inquiries by members. Statements and committee reports. Go ahead, Councillor Oslach.
Yes, Your Worship. As the mayor stated earlier, the passing of the Queen was held Monday at the Cenotaph, and the Legion members were all in attendance, and the town staff.
Any further statements and committee reports? Okay. There's no report of the mayor, notice of motion. There is no meeting closed to the public, so adjournment.
This is moved by Councillor Barber and seconded by Councillor Oslach that council do now adjourn at 7:33 p.m.
Okay, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.